While plenty of old horror shows seem downright corny in 2025, classics like Twin Peaks and Tales from the Crypt can go toe-to-toe with any contemporary scary series. The horror genre has a unique history on TV. Since television censorship was often even tighter than movie censorship during the 1940s and 1950s, horror shows were a rare sight. The earliest horror TV shows, from The Twilight Zone to Alfred Hitchcock Presents, blended their scares with other, more accessible genres to get past censors. The latter was primarily billed as a mystery series while the former was a sci-fi anthology show, although both were plenty scary, as fans can attest. In 2025, unapologetic horror shows like It, Welcome to Derry feature gory moments that can match any scary movie playing at the multiplex. As such, there has been a boom in small-screen output for the genre. Ever since Tales from the Crypt normalized R-rated horror content in TV shows in the early 90s, the genre has gone from strength to strength. From Buffy the Vampire Slayer's upcoming reboot to the anthology show Slasher, to the sprawling American Horror Story franchise, and even Netflix's hit Stranger Things, horror is a constant presence in major TV shows nowadays. Despite this, a few classic horror shows are still better than any of their more recent competitors. 6. The Outer Limits. The Outer Limits began back in 1963 and ran until 1965 on ABC, while its 1995 revival ran for 7 seasons on Showtime. Often seen as a competitor to The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits is famous for 2 things. Firstly, its stories were even more sci-fi-centric than those of The Twilight Zone, which often incorporated fantasy elements. Secondly, the twist endings of the Outer Limits episodes were nefariously dark, so much so that the TV tropes page for Cruel Twist Endings was originally entitled Outer Limits Twist. The Outer Limits pushed the boundaries of what viewers would accept when it came to pure, mean-spirited nastiness, setting up future horror shows while still leaving viewers reliably unnerved even decades later. 5. Tales from the Dark Side. Running from 1983 until 1988, Tales from the Dark Side was originally created by Night of the Living Dead director and horror legend George A. Romero. Although the show had plenty of sci-fi and fantasy story elements, Tales from the Dark Side was primarily a horror anthology show. Its dark sense of humor meant Tales from the Dark Side recaptured the cartoonish tone of Romero's earlier collaboration with Stephen King, 1982's anthology movie Creeps How. King himself even penned 2 episodes of the show, as did the legendary horror writers Clive Barker, Harlan Ellison, and Robert Bloch. Tales from the Dark Side was never able to get quite as dark as later horror anthology shows, as the series was constrained by the standards of 80s television. However, considering these limitations, it is impressive to see just how creepy episodes like Season 4, Episode 14, The Cutty Black Sow, can get without ever showing any explicit gore on screen. For The X-Files. Although The X-Files is much more than just a horror show, no list of classic horror shows that have withstood the test of time would be complete without the iconic Fox series. Originally running from 1993 until 2002, The X-Files told the story of 2 mismatched FBI agents investigating paranormal activity across America. While David Duchovny's Agent Mulder is a conspiracy theorist, his deadpan colleague Agent Scully is a complete skeptic. Inevitably, sparks fly between the pair as Scully struggles to find a rational explanation for every horror they face. And those horrors are sometimes truly memorable. Episodes like Season 4, Episode 2, Home, and Season 2, Episode 2, The Host, proved that The X-Files could be just as terrifying as any straightforward horror show if the series wanted to be. The show's snappy, self-aware dialogue only made its scares stronger, and influenced dozens of hits that followed in the decade after The X-Files debuted. Viewers would never have gotten Supernatural, Fringe, Evil, The Outsider, or even Buffy the Vampire Slayer's upcoming reboot if The X-Files had never brought horror into a mainstream police procedural. By blending the genre into this familiar format, the series breathed new life into horror's small-screen potential. 3. Tales from the Crypt. Shortly before The X-Files debuted, another equally iconic 90s horror series was paving the way for many more TV horror hits that followed. Hosted by a ghoulish, decrepit crypt keeper with terrible taste in puns, Tales from the Crypt was a horror anthology that lasted 7 seasons between 1989 and 1996. As an HBO show, Tales from the Crypt was able to feature all the nudity, foul language, and gore that was cut from network shows, and the series reveled in its creative freedom. A slew of notable directors, including Walter Hill, Richard Donner, and Robert Zemeckis, made TV's greatest horror anthology show an absurdly fun gorefest. As silly as it was scary, Tales from the Crypt was notable not just for its content, but also for its style. Loosely adapted from the EC comics of the 50s, Tales from the Crypt had a gleefully nasty, over-the-top tone that can still be seen in modern hits like the Terrifier franchise or The Substance. 2. Twin Peaks. While The X-Files might have influenced a string of hits that followed the series, the show itself was heavily influenced by an even earlier hit. Created by David Lynch and Mark Frost, Twin Peaks followed Kyle MacLachlan's Dale Cooper as the quirky FBI agent investigating a tragic murder in the titular town. Of course, that synopsis hardly does justice to the show's unique appeal. Twin Peaks is a rare TV thriller viewers need to watch at least twice if they want to fully understand the series, as the show is densely packed with symbolism and strange, surreal clues to its supernatural mystery. Blending soap opera, small-town drama, offbeat comedy, elements of fantasy, and a thrumming undercurrent of dark psychological horror, Twin Peaks feels like no other show that has come before or since. As a result, this utterly unique series has stood the test of time since its original release. 1. The Twilight Zone. There are a lot of great shows listed here, and each is a horror series viewers should watch at least once. However, none of these titles is quite as influential as the cultural benchmark that was The Twilight Zone. Beginning in 1959, The Twilight Zone was a blend of sci-fi, fantasy, mystery, thriller, and horror that felt utterly original. Grounded by the seminal satirical writer and creator Rod Serling, The Twilight Zone stories were famous for their ingenious twists, their sharp, unsparing social commentary, and their inventive approaches to narrative. An anthology series, The Twilight Zone expanded the limits of what viewers expected from TV shows in the 60s. As deft, poignant, and thoughtful as it was unsettling, satirical, and creepy, The Twilight Zone provided viewers with some of the most memorable twist endings of all time throughout its original run. After the original show ended in 1964, the series was revived by CBS from 1985 to 1989.